Well, I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. My name is Ken Schlenker, and I am one of the contributing authors to The Heart of a Chaplain. And we're going to have Dr. Jim Browning, who was one of the editors of the book, here for the interview. So, Jim, how are you tonight?
I'm great. Ken, it's good to be with you. Clint, it's great to see you again, my friend. So it's an honor to be with you. And having gone through 2 years of CPE, I am empathetic and sympathetic of what you're going through. So it's good to be with you.
So, Jim, we've been on a journey for a while. We're now in the second edition of the book. But like to bring people along that journey. So, could you just kind of give a brief introduction about who you are and what your role has been
Sure.
with this?
Just very briefly, I started out growing up in West Texas, graduated in high school and junior college and college, and went to seminary in Fort Worth, Texas, and did 2 years of CPE at Baylor Hospital in Dallas. Back in the old days when CPE was like the razor blade, the guy that cut you open and spread your chest open and cut your heart and sew you back together and said, "Don't you feel better now?" And I said, "No, I hurt a lot." But actually, CPE for me was transformative, and I'm grateful for it. After that, I pastored two churches, senior pastor up in the panhandle of Texas, and then ended up going 28 and a half years active duty Air Force, where retired as a full bird colonel, both as a command chaplain. And then my final assignment was the largest joint base here in San Antonio. About a year after that, Dr. Jim Spivey, who was a visionary of what we call now the Marsh Institute, invited me to be a part of it. And we literally started out with an idea, created a brochure, and then we've been in existence for about 6.5 years. But the Marsh Institute really formed around a very simple idea. How can we work together to enhance the effectiveness of chaplaincy worldwide? And it's been an amazing journey. It's been a whirlwind ride, but got involved at the grassroots level after a year of working together. He made me the director of the Marsh Institute, so I've been at that all along. A year ago, we announced that we were had formed a 501(c)(3, our religious nonprofit corporation, and so we have moved out from underneath an umbrella of a seminary called B.H. Carroll Theological Seminary. And now we have been operating as this nonprofit for the primary reason that it enables us to collaborate across the board.
So, you mentioned about the Marsh Institute. Describe more about that and the pillars that exist with the Marsh Institute.
Yeah, Ken, I appreciate that question. The Marsh Institute, its vision is empowering chaplains worldwide. Now, let that sink in for a moment because that is not an easy step that we took lightly, but we really felt like that God has been uh, nurturing and pushing us toward that about 4 years ago. Our mission is very simple: to collaborate, to equip, to support, and advocate for chaplains in diverse and global settings. And those four words are our four pillars: to collaborate, i.e., to partner and strategically align with anyone who's really willing to come along a round table and sit in a chair and to figure out how we together can impact chaplaincy and its effectiveness. Equip predominantly is that of education, providing training and education resources for the volunteer chaplain all the way up through the Master Divinity and beyond. The support is how can we provide really just-in-time resources for real-time needs. In the past, we've done that with webinars. We're exploring another project now that we hope to bring to fruition that would give chaplains across the board, even globally, a ready tool that they could use. Advocate is one that is probably the most challenging area for us at the moment. How do you tell the story of chaplains? It's amazing to me as I fly a lot of trips and people sit next to me, they'll ask, "Well, what is a chaplain?" It's amazing how many people don't even know that at the very, very basic level. And so it's really in a confirming way, these are what chaplains are, what they do. But then there's also a supportive element of advocacy for there are organizations out there that would like to get rid of chaplaincy, like in places like the military. And so there's times that how can we band together to be a voice for those whose very job may be dependent on, the bean counters wanting to cut the budget as they did several years ago in the state of Texas to get rid of all state correction chaplains. And it was a group of people that came together and said, if you do it, here's the cost that it will incur to you. So those are our four major pillars, and it's fun to be a part and meet guys like Ken and others that have that collaborative spirit of how can we truly do that? How can we come together to enhance chaplaincy?
Jim, I think through the evolution of where we're started from and where we're at today. And when we first got together, there was issues about all these different organizations that are out there that have kind of stovepiped chaplaincy. And the group that you and Jim Spivey had put together for the creation of the book was very diverse. Not just diverse across context, but we had 47 different.
Well, first edition was 37 contributing authors, 914 years of experience, and the second edition is 44 contributing authors, well over 1,000 years. I didn't go back to add it up, but I know it's well over 1,000. And you're right, we did not ask people to write sections that we knew. We asked people, who do you know that would be best to write this section? And it was because of that, Ken, that the breadth of involvement really grew into the writing of this book.
So, how did you all determine what that breadth looked like, and why did you choose what you chose?
Well, one of the reasons when the Marsh Institute started, and back when it started, we called it the Marsh Center. The best book on the market was Naomi Paget's and Jan McCormick's little book called The Work of a Chaplain, about 135-page book. And the one before that predated it probably another 15 years. And so what we realized 6.5 years ago, that there was not a good, solid, academically sound, very across the board chaplain book for seminarians. We wrote The Heart of a Chaplain really to answer the question of what is chaplaincy, and is God calling me to it? What do I understand enough to sense, is this where God is calling? And it's much more than that, but at the very basic level, we wanted to help students at the time, seminary students, to ask those two questions or answer those two questions. What we discovered was it was much broader than that. CPE seminars are using it, like you guys and others, especially our volunteer chaplains. We've had endorsers buy for every chaplain. The VA folks that work with the VA chaplains bought a copy. 700 copies sent to every VA chaplain. So we've been very, very pleased at the acceptance of this book. And again, there's 5 major sections. I know we're going to get into that, but it's been a book that to really try to help people understand why chaplaincy is very unique, very different from being a pastor. And just because you put on the badge that says I'm a chaplain doesn't mean that you're trained and ready to go.
So, what have you personally learned through the last, what has it been, about 4 years now?
6.5 years.
6.5 years, okay.
Yeah, of being part of the Marsh Center. Boy, that is a great question, Ken. And I think for me, I knew military chaplaincy very well because I did 20.5 years in it. I knew hospital chaplaincy some because of my 2 years at Baylor Hospital in Dallas. But I had no idea the breadth and the depth of chaplaincy. Ken, you're a good example. You spent 30, 40 years working predominantly in the public safety world of chaplaincy. I had no idea of the work and the depth of law enforcement chaplains or public, safety. Just had no idea. I knew nothing of correctional chaplaincy. And so it's been really eye-opening to see how broad chaplains' work is. And we've got some of the most incredible chaplains. I'll use Jeffrey Clays, who is a biker chaplain, who leads a worship service at a Harley Davidson shop every Sunday. And when you talk with him, you think, this guy's no bumpkin. This guy's a brilliant individual who is ministering to a very microscopic part of our culture. Mary Flynn is somebody in our second edition. She is training chaplains to go into the impoverished, drug infested, homeless communities. And they're discovering and you all know this inherently, by being a part of an institution, a part of a community, earning their trust, you are far more effective by working from the inside than you are from the outside. That's a great question, Ken.
So, part of the journey has also been on the international focus, and I know that there was just a trip back into Ukraine. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, we were invited by a denomination endorser to go to Ukraine with him. His purpose was to do some training with some um, youth leaders in a Eastern Europe predominantly. But because of connection, Ken, that really you made with me to the International Police Chaplains Conference. I met a Ukrainian police chaplain who was the lead chaplain. And because of that one connection, Ukraine opened up in an unbelievable way. We got to engage the National Police Chaplain's graduation. I am now an official patrol chaplain for Ukraine, and we got to see their police headquarters. But the one that astounded us was the School of Judges. These are Supreme Court level judges and below that train all judges in Ukraine. They were very interested in us being a part of a conversation of how can they create a chaplaincy for all judges in Ukraine. We're planning on going back probably this early fall, and that conversation has already started. And we may be able to join the training of just some 500 chaplains in Ukraine. God is exploding that door open. It's amazing to see what He's doing, and we sense that Africa may be not too far behind. Quite frankly, Ken, it scares the bejeebies out of us and what God is calling us to, but it's equally exciting.
Very cool. So, when you look at your personal formation as a chaplain, how do you see this book aligning from an educational standpoint, and maybe even from a outcome basis with clinical pastoral education? How should this book be viewed?
Ken, I think in the opening chapter of the book, I share a clinical pastoral education story. In my first 2 semesters or 2 units of CP, my 2 supervisors were ready to kick me out of the program. And I think they were serious. I don't think it was a scare tactic. I think they were seeing a guy that my first unit was, I thought I was very aware of my emotions and kind of who I was. And Dr. Joe Gross at Baylor, his evaluation of me was I was clueless. And unfortunately, he was right. And so I think for me, chaplaincy is a journey. It's a faith journey, but it's also a journey of learning who you are, whose you are, and what is it that God has enabled within you and your personality and your temperament. And I make this point in the opening chapter of the book. It's learning to walk with people where they are. The focus is not on the chaplain, but the focus is on the individual that you're walking with. And so I tell the story of my first time in a hospital environment. I thought I was there to cheer people up. And later I called that McClown ministry. My second effort was to discover why they were there, what was going on, what support group did they have? Those 1,000 questions, I call that my detective ministry. And later I saw Bob as he was walking alongside one of the patients on my floor, as she was holding on the rail and as she was talking with her left hand, or using her left hand as she talked. Bob was walking alongside her, and I was outside of earshot, so I don't know what they were saying. But that image of Bob walking alongside, I realized that a chaplain's world is one of a sojourner, the walking alongside. And that, Ken, I will tell you, changed my model of ministry, not just in the hospital, but through the rest of my military career and even now. Because as we walk alongside someone, neither seeking to cheer them up or take their pain away, but to understand what's going on in their world, God uses those engagements I think I've learned more from those patients than they ever did from me. And so I think as chaplains, it's being a sojourner. And I think for any of us, regardless of where we are in our ministerial career, that's a lifelong lesson. And
Mhm.
it takes people who will come alongside you, like CPE and IPR verbatims and wise supervisors that can help you to integrate who you are and whose you are with what you do. So I'm very grateful for that CPE experience.
That's very good. So, as you have been touched by all the myriad number of people that have put together the book, how is that, would you say, has it augmented that perspective? How has it affirmed it?
Well, Ken, one of the projects that you've been involved in was creating audio files from the book.
Oh, yeah.
And uh, and so because of that journey, I listened to it twice in the audio. And so I'd be doing something, outside and listening to it. And I found myself stopping and saying, man, that was really good. There are so many good pearls of wisdom. When you're editing the book, you're putting it together, you're focused on structure and the grammar and, trying to look at literally every sentence to see how can I make that tighter, more condensed, not changing the concepts or the really the flavor of the author. But it was amazing listening to your audio files. It made me appreciate the book that much more because here is 44 contributing authors, many of them giving this work away. Even though we offered to pay per page, a large number of them said, no, I want you to take that. It's my contribution to the chaplaincy. And I think for me to listen to their stories, their memorable moments, are powerful. The hopefully the case studies are reflective, and I think for me it has made me appreciate what it is to have as a heart of a chaplain. When I teach the course, or a webinar, what is the heart of a chaplain? I really start at the back of the book and go forward. Because if you look at our definition of what a chaplain is, at the very essence of it for us, it's a sacred calling. If you miss that, if you don't understand that, I think then you're a life coach or a social worker. So for that is a critical element for us.
So I'm glad that you went there because my next question, we got one, two, three, maybe even 400 students in here. We have supervisors, we have supervisor educators. How do you recommend the book be used with regard to things like verbatims or supervision or reflection? And a caveat to that, you've also graciously supplied the facilitator guide and the student workbooks to be used. And I know that the hope is to get endorsements and evaluations back to you on it. So, what is it that you're looking for, and how can the book be used?
Thank you, Ken. That's another great question. I tell folks, if you only read one chapter, read Jim Spivey's chapter 2. When he gave that to me to go through and edit and for us to embed it in the book, the chapters were not written sequentially. They were written as we engaged people and they got them to us. When Dr. Jim Spivey gave it to me, I told him, I said, I had needed that chapter 35 years ago. Chapter 2, I think, is that critical chapter of the spiritual formation and the call. He articulates it in a way that I'd never heard it before, and he tells one of his life stories. In fact, one of the things we ask each contributing author is don't just give us the facts, give us a little bit of your own journey, your own life story. And I think you will see that in these contributing authors is that you will hear some of their own, Dick Milsvitz in chapter 3 tells us a story where a patient screams at him, says, "Get out of my room." And I love the vulnerability of each of these authors, contributing authors. But chapter 2, I think, was pivotal because if you don't understand whose you are and who you are, then the rest of it becomes incomplete. And so I tell folks, chapter 2 is really a pivotal chapter. My first chapter is really answering the question of why do you want to be a chaplain? And you have seen that there are people who want to put on the badge of chaplain, but really don't have the call uh, for ministry, let alone in that vocation of chaplaincy. So to me, that's a pivotal part. But I think the reason we created the workbooks, we had a police chaplain who bought 20 books, says, "Hey, I want to do this with my volunteer police chaplains. How do you teach a book?" And so what we tried to do initially, I started saying, "Well, this is how I teach it when I do it seminary." But then I thought, let's step back from that. And we created these two resources, an instructor guide and a student guide. I think what my hope is, and Clint, I hope that you'll be brutally honest as you go through this and other supervisors and the students, what worked, what didn't work. But I think what I want to do, and what we tried to do with these resources, is to give you some insights to help you to target or focus your instruction time. All of us are so stinking busy. And so what we tried to do is give you some, instructor teaching notes. The reflection questions was an addition to the second edition. I had a CPE group that said, we love the book, but it would really help if you help us focus with some questions. So we did that in the Heart of a Chaplain second edition. We added 34, I think, case studies. Some of them, Ken, I followed your example of getting out and seeing real world examples. And so some of these are um, that we found in the news report. The appendix on the survey of competencies, Dick Milspa, who used to be the College of Chaplains president that predates ACPE, he'd spent a lifetime thinking about competencies. And so we created that survey in the back. What I recommend there is you take it on yourself, give it to a trusted mentor, and have them take it on you, thinking about you. The scoring system isn't the important part. It's the conversation then that you have between you and your mentor. I might think I might be a 6 in one of these competencies, and a guy like Clinton says, "No, you're a 2." And the 6 and 2, that what then becomes important is that conversation between the two of you. And so, but anyway, we created these documents hopefully to help the student and the instructor to be able to focus deeper in the great pearls here. Our goal was 250 pages. We exceeded that on the first edition. And the second edition, I said, it's more important that we get you the quality of work. And so we expanded about 83 pages. I think it was 9 new chapters. I would encourage you to make sure to read Eric Whitmore's on the liminal, the marginal and the liminal nature of chaplaincy. He hit something there that most chaplains feel underappreciated, undervalued. He's given us a real pearl of wisdom there, Ken. And so I would challenge every student to make sure that you read that chapter.
Yeah, and as far as resources, there's a lot that you have provided up to this point. You want to talk about some things that are coming down the pike.
Well, one certainly that, Ken, that you're working on for us is taking the Heart of a Chaplain and create either some continuing education or standalone classes that we're real excited that we can translate very easily into Ukrainian. So that's one that we're really excited about, and we're working hard to try to pull the resources where we can do that. Going back into Ukraine, we're working this to get in Ukrainian. language. It's just about being translated in Spanish now, with other languages to follow. We've got an app that we're not quite ready to announce, but we're working on an app that will be, I think, a game changer, that uses not just our book, but Langston Jumpers and Steve Keith's book, Chaplaincy Introduction. Uh, Again, it's the value of coming across people like Ken and you guys, of how we can collaborate together and bring together resources, again, to impact chaplaincy across the world. We really are blessed in the United States. And I think, quite frankly, that your major hospital chaplains are probably the best trained chaplains, bar none. Because you think about it, you got a Master of Divinity, you've got a at least a year of CPE, then you have BCC certification. Military is close behind. The Federal Bureau of Corrections is probably close behind, and then the VA. But when you drop down from that, Ken, you well know that, except for like CMCA, Correctional Ministries Chaplain Association, or ICPC, International Conference of Police Chaplains, when you step away from those two organizations, you are largely on your own. Now, there's some others, the international, I think, firefighters, chaplains, uh, but they're stovepiped. And Ken, here's our point, and here's, I think, the major difference of what the Marsh Institute is trying to do. I think every chaplain ought to find a hospice chaplain, and get to know them. I have, oh, I thought I could grab it quickly, and I can't. I came across a hospice chaplain that wrote a book, as a hospice, and it's excellent, excellent. Every chaplain, I think, ought to find a hospice chaplain and learn from them. Why can't we cross pollinate? You know, a public safety chaplain. Boy, there's a lot you could teach a military chaplain. There's a lot that hospital chaplains did. And if we cross pollinate, then we learn the best of those different worlds. And I think we'll all be better chaplains because of it. That's that collaborative nature, is teach me what, help me to learn what I can learn from you. And maybe there's something that I know that I can help you learn.
Sure. So I got two more questions, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Uh,
Excellent.
First question is, well, not so much a question, but can you discuss, does the relationship that exists between the Marsh Institute and CPEI? Could you talk more about that?
Yeah, that's great. Dallas Spate, I've met at conferences, and we've talked probably 4 or 5 years, and we realize that there are things that you guys are doing with CPI that we can benefit from, and vice versa. So, for instance, the Heart of the Chaplain for the CPE students, we created a strategic affiliation so that you should have, if you don't, I can tell you, I send that to you. You can buy the Heart of a Chaplain at a 30% discount, which is far greater than any other discount that's out there. And so, and Dallas is working with us, and really in a collaborative spirit. There are things that you guys are doing at CPEI that we can piggyback on, and collectively we can make a greater impact. But yeah, the CPI organization, we're same way with CareForce. I want to give you a shout out, Ken. Those three organizations, and then Jumpers and Langston and Keith's book, really are forming the foundation of creating a certificate in chaplaincy that we intend to take to that volunteer level to begin with, and to move up. Ken, your point earlier, too many organizations are stovepiped. It's my little protected world. You do it my way, only this way. You pay your fees and you'll get our logo, and then you go out and be the chaplain. We don't believe in that. We believe in the collaborative nature produces a much better product.
Thank you, Jim. And the last question is, what advice would you give to those that are listening to this interview?
Be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to show your. I've never seen the back of my head, but Ken has seen it many a time, and others have seen it many a time. And I think having that courage to be vulnerable and let others see in you what you may be ignoring or not seeing in yourself. It took a CPE group of 5 other students for me to rip out that tape that was stuck in my head that gave me a false sense of who I was, a insecure sense of who I was. It took two supervisors and those five students to say that tape is a bunch of bull. Why are you listening to it? And that became revolutionary and life changing. And so I think it takes a community of people who want to invest in you, and that takes courage. It takes being vulnerable. It takes uh, awareness of where your shortfalls are. I would say trust the process. Sometimes it's brutal, sometimes it's painful, but it's a process by which, if you'll hang in there in the tough times, the outcome is well worth the pain.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's go ahead and open up the mics. And if anybody has any questions or comments for Jim, let's just have an open floor now.
Well, I'm going to ask Clint one. Clinton, you saw this prototype back in conference. What was it that intrigued you? And we made it better from what you saw early on. What intrigued you to want to use this in your CPE class?
Well, I think first of all, the workbooks, to me, I'm looking for that. Just like you said earlier, I'm looking for the resources that help target and focus the learning and help me figure out what to do with the textbook. So I think that was the main thing. And I want to be fair to you and fair to our process here. We're just started our unit just a couple weeks ago, so we don't have a lot of track record with it. But everything you're saying about the chapter two and some of these other things we have seen is really ringing true for us.
Good,
And
good.
so we'll have a lot more to say about it, I'm sure, as the unit progresses. But uh, I think we make an assumption when we interview people that they want to be a chaplain, and we don't really question the motives. And I think that one big takeaway I have from y'all's interview tonight is, asking students to articulate that sense of call. To help me understand your spiritual formation that brought you to this conviction, and using language like that.
Yeah, and as you read Jim's chapter, you'll see that the call focuses on whose are you
Yeah.
and who are you. And out of that, then later comes the roles and responsibilities. As a military chaplain, at 62 years of age, I timed out, so I took the uniform off. Did that mean my call ended? I don't think so. If you think of Romans 8, I think it is that the call is irrevocable, unending. And so if the call of God in our lives is continual, then the role change. I'm no longer a military chaplain. Does that mean that I'm no longer involved in a ministry of some sort? And quite frankly, I think that 28 and a half years of military chaplaincy prepared me to do what I'm doing right now with the Marsh Institute.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how sometimes chaplains are ones that couldn't make it in the church. And so they think chaplaincy is a little bit easier than that. But I remember I was at a conference and this guy said, I traded my church of 1,200 for a church of 2,400. And I was like, what? Well, no, I'm sorry, a church of 200 for a church of 2,400. And he was a corporate chaplain.
Mhm.
And so he expanded his reach and influence by working for a company. And I thought that was brilliant. But when I went into chaplaincy, many people said, when are you going to go back and be a real minister? And that always cut me the wrong way.
Yeah, and you'll see in Chuck Cornelius's response to that, that was one of the frequently asked questions. Why did you leave the ministry? And I would tell you it is ministry on steroids in a specialized setting. Let me give you one quick analogy, and this and I know our time is just about up. I'm a woodworker because I couldn't afford shelves in the beginning, so I bought 4 concrete blocks and 2 boards, and that was the shelves in our trailer home at the time. And I'm a kind of a get her done kind of guy, and so I bought a circular saw and a router, and I started my woodworking career. You can't see it, but I've built probably half the furniture in our home. I built all the cabinets except for our kitchen, and that became kind of my ministry. I'm tired of dealing with people, so I'd go out and start working with wood. But somewhere along the way, my first chisel was a screwdriver. You remember those big Sears Craftsman flat-headed screwdrivers? Well, if you're creating a lap joint and you need to chuck some wood out, I took a big hammer and I used my big screwdriver and I'd tear the wood out. Well, somewhere along the way, somebody said, well, you know that down at the lumber yard, they sell chisels. So I went down to Clark Lumber Company and I bought a package of 3 chisels, probably for 3 or 4 or 5 bucks. And sure enough, man, they worked a whole lot better than my screwdriver. About 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a world-renowned woodworking school in northern Maine, Rockport, Maine, and 3 months of, I mean, intensive woodworking. For the first 2 days, we had to buy a set of high quality chisels. I bought Lee Nelson chisels. I bought, I think, 5, 6 chisels for $300 or $400. And for 2 days, we took one chisel out of that set and we sharpened them. And after a day and a half, I handed it to Libby, our instructor, and she pulled up one of these magnifying glasses that jewelers use. And she held it up and she said, well, you got a nick on the left side and 3 scratches. And I'm thinking, these people are insane. Well, I spent the rest of that day finishing sharpening that chisel, handed it to her, and she said, you got it. Now, I want to tell you the difference between a blunt screwdriver and that razor sharp, highly polished chisel was like night and day. It revolutionized my woodworking. Instead of using sawdust and glue to fill my joint, if you could see my desk that I'm sitting at, the wood perfectly butts up. The China hutch I built, the 45 degrees, perfectly match. The difference is knowing how to use a sharp chisel. Now, here's my analogy. I put on a badge that says, I'm a chaplain. You're a dull screwdriver. You're going to do damage to the people that you care about. I've got a big heart and I just love Jesus. Well, that's a start, but that's not where you need to end. And so, you get a little training. Now you're a sharper chisel. But when you are highly trained and highly skilled, highly competent, and you are integrated who you are, whose you are with what you do, the difference is unbelievable. And so CPE is that way of putting an edge on that chisel. Is it always fun? Absolutely not. But allow your chisel to be sharpened, and the difference that it makes is unbelievable. So CP is is that grit against the metal, Clint. So God bless you guys for doing what you're doing. Yes, sir. One last probably question or two, and Clint, I want to be faithful to y'all's time.
Well,
Okay.
Kevin, if you want to go ahead, you can.
Okay. I think it kind of relates to our conversation because the book is, The Heart of a Chaplain. Dr. Browning, I'm new to chaplaincy. I started, I want to say mid-July in the hospital setting, and this is my second unit of CPE. And so I'm still very much just learning as far as the heart of a chaplain. I couldn't help but notice and I'm not sure if you've seen it, the video that Secretary Pete Hegseth put out about reformation needing to take place within military chaplaincy specifically. And he was making the comment about how, I think what he was saying is that our culture has changed chaplaincy in a way that is very different than what it was first founded in its intent. And so I guess my question is, are we living in a time where culture is really, changing ideas and expectations as far as what a chaplain is and their role that's so much different than when chaplaincy was first introduced by George Washington?
I'm glad you know that date, 1775. Yes.
Yeah.
George
So
Washington hired the first chaplain in the Continental Army before there was a constitution. There's two responses to that. One is think back of what Paul was dealing with at the Mars Hill. He was bringing the reason we chose the hurricane lamp. Think of this is a difference between a minister at a church versus a chaplain. A minister is the safe harbor. He casts or she casts light far and wide to say, come to this safe harbor to renew, replenish, you know, to be prepared to sail back into the world, into the seas. A chaplain, a hurricane lamp is used when there's storm, when there's chaos. A chaplain carries, in my case, the light of Christ to a battlefield or an ICU room or a prison cell, wherever there is darkness or chaos or storm. Are we there in the good times? Absolutely, because it's being there in the good times that you build trust and relationship so that they will turn to you in the bad times. But you think of Paul at Mars Hill, he was dealing with a culture that was pretty caustic to Christianity. That really hadn't changed. We're always in an institution, whether it's the military or the hospital, many of the hospitals, you are in a secular institution. And you're going to be dealing with bosses that may have no appreciation or understanding of what you do. In my first 2 months of active duty, we had a plane crash, blew up a tanker, killed 4 people. The commander of the base, who saw me on a disaster, we call it DCG, disaster control group. I was on a bus that was about to go to the crash site over in Canada. I was stationed in northern Maine. He wrote later, he said he saw me and he asked me, why is a chaplain on the bus? He knew all 4 of those people died. What he didn't realize was the chaplain wasn't there just to pick up pieces. Literally, that's what we did. It was helping those that were about to pick up pieces. It was to walk with those who had put out the fire of that plane. It was the security forces that were protecting the area. He later wrote on my conditional reserve status form, he said, after watching Chaplain Browning those 3 or 4 days, he said, I now understood what a chaplain was about. Those who have no understanding of what a chaplain is going to be informed of the difference between being a minister in a church for what a chaplain is. You are working in an institution that may have no appreciation of what you do, and you earn their respect and you earn their opportunities. But here's what I found by being a chaplain now as a colonel. The commanders, the generals, either the colonels all the way up to the 4-star, the higher the rank you go in the organization, the fewer people that you have that you can look them in the eye, or that they will have that you will look them in the eye and ask them how they're doing. Because everybody else is operational in some sense. A chaplain can navigate the seams of an organization, and I've done this. I've looked at a commander in the eye that just had a member of his organization murdered. And I asked him how you were doing. He said, oh, chaplain, I'm busy taking care of my people. Da, da, da. I said, sir, that's not what I asked. I asked how you were doing. Oh, chaplain, I'm doing okay. And I looked at him in the eye and I said, sir, we were both colonels. I said, sir, did you just lie to a chaplain? He said, yeah, I'm not doing very good. I said, that's why I'm here. So the higher up in an organization, the fewer people that they can trust to be honest and real and human. That's the role of a chaplain. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it
Walk with
does.
people where they are in the midst of their pain, and they will teach you far more than what you will teach them. But together, you form a moment in time where God can be real to both of you. That's the heart of a chaplain. Being God's representative in a pretty bad situation. And there's a lot of them in a hospital.
Well, Jim, we just want to thank you for the time that you gave our group tonight. And I love you, brother. and just appreciate everything that you stand for in the Marsh Institute. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Clint. Thank you for the entire class for the moment, just to be able to engage you. Just know that this journey that you on is transformative, not only for you, but the people that you will touch. Don't be the dull screwdriver. Don't even be a halfway shot chisel. Learn to sharpen your edge. And I will tell you, I'm still on that path. I'm still learning from guys like Ken and others. They are still teaching me what it is to have the heart of a chaplain. So God bless you and thank you. And I look forward to hearing back from you, Clint, as you get through this journey. I look forward to hearing what worked, what didn't work. How can we make this better? Because we truly are in this lifelong journey of being a part of his work and his kingdom. So God bless you. Thank you, Ken,
Well,
again, and Clint and others.
well, thank you for being here. And to me, what really stirred up in me through tonight is I'm such a pragmatist and I just want to get into the listening skills and get into the skill part of it, the competency part of it. And I think an overlooked part of my program has been the inspirational part. The why are we here? What are we doing here? And tonight, is a great use of our time. And it makes me want to have you on every time we start a group because I feel like that there's uh, it's just such a foundational thing that help us check in with and to keep us inspired. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate the story, not only the book, but I just appreciate your ministry, and then come and being willing to come and kind of bring this inspirational aspect, which is something we really need. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Let me conclude with this very short story. I'm sitting in the middle of a plane, middle seat, have this lady sitting on my right, and I don't remember a guy on my left. And I'm having a pity party. I'm having to leave my family and my wife's family on a vacation in Arkansas, and I'm returning back to Dallas, where I was the chaplain there. And I have my book. I'm just, it predates earpods. I'm just trying to cocoon myself. And I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to deal with anybody. I'm having a pity party. And this lady sitting next to me tries to strike up a conversation. And I'm polite, but I'm, yes, yes. And then back in my book. And finally, she asks me, well, what do you do? And I honestly did not want to tell her, well, I'm a chaplain at a hospital, major hospital in Dallas, because I wasn't being very ministerially polite to her. And when I said that, she said, oh, praise Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. And now I'm feeling rather rotten. And I turned to her. She was an African American lady. And I said, who are you? Why are you on this plane? She said, I've had a death in my family. I'm scared to death of flying. This is my first flight. And my Sunday school class said, God will put somebody next to you to remind you of his presence. I closed my book. At first, I confessed, oh Lord, forgive me. I wasn't much of a shepherd. I closed my book and we talked the rest of the journey. I don't know who she is, but I owe a great deal to her because it was my reminder that God can strike a mighty blow, or in this case, provide a mighty support, even in our unworthiness. I was absolutely not prepared for what God wanted of me in that moment. He got me out of myself. He got me focused on him and he got me focused on her. And she touched me far deeper than I think I touched her. But in that moment of her greatest need, being terrified of flying, going to a family funeral, she reminded her that God had somebody to represent him with her in that flight. And so I was humbled by it, and I'm grateful. So anyway, God bless you,
All right.
and I
Thank you,
look
Jim.
forward to hearing back.
All right, guys. So we're going to stop the recording